Hello, today I'm going to talk about a ribbon controller that I built from a ribbon controller, I guess. This is a soft pot. I don't remember the name of the company. I bought this a couple years ago meaning to do this and, finally did it. This is the 750 millimeter version. There's also a 1 meter version, but it's like $60 right now. On this end, I have a 1/4 inch jack mounted to the end of this scrap of maple. On the underside, I have some adhesive backed rubber, and the 1/4 inch jack goes up to this module here. On the left, we have a volt per octave CV output, and on the right, there is a gate output. So here's what the circuit looks like behind that module. We have the TRS jack. The sleeve is the low voltage on the pot. The ring is the high, and the tip I've used for the wiper. And on this top half, I'm simply buffering that voltage that we get and protection resistor. And on the bottom half, I am comparing it to a trim pot, which is setting a minimum voltage. So that's why I have this resistor here. Because when I'm not touching the potentiometer, then the tip is disconnected, so the 1 meg pulls it to ground, and then we're just using this as a comparator and comparing it to some value which is somewhere down in this 2.2K of the voltage divider, and that just tells us whether we are touching it or not. And then I have an inverter with a 2N7000 MOSFET. Not really sure why I did that. I think maybe I was originally going to power the op amp from plus minus 12, and I didn't want 12 volt to minus 12 volt gate output, so I put an inverter in there from the 5 volts. But I ended up going with an op amp that was running on the 5 volts anyways, so I guess I could have left out that inverter and just switched the inputs on that bottom op amp. Originally I used an MCP 602, and I learned something new about op amp specifications. The common mode input range is an important specification. The problem was that when I got up towards the top of the pot, I was getting too close to the VDD rail for the MCP 602, which only lets the inputs go as high as 1.2 volts below the VDD rail, and it was then maxing out and not working correctly. But I learned that the MCP 6002 has a much wider input range, and it's working great. So as for how I have this patched, I have the gate output is just going straight to a VCA over here, and the CV output is going to the volt per octave on my oscillator, and also to the frequency cutoff on this diode ladder filter designed by Moritz Klein. And I currently have the low pass and band pass options on, and I'll refer you to his video on the filter if you'd like to learn what that means to have both of those on. And then I'm putting it through a delay here. This triple splashback is based on Look Mum No Computer circuit, but I laid out the PCB myself. And then I'm just mixing some wet and dry, because I find that at least with my copy of the triple splashback, I don't get a lot of high end or a lot of presence, so I mix in mostly dry with some wet. Now, an interesting feature of this style of ribbon controller is how it behaves when you press it in more than one place. Now, if I press a C and an E, it makes sense that I get a D, but if we bring that up here to the next octave, that's not a D at all. And if we try it on the bottom octave, you can barely hear that anything's happening there. So to understand this, you need to understand how this thing is working. Unlike a normal potentiometer, the wiper is not always connected to anything. So here's a schematic of what we can think of this as a big voltage divider where we've got 5 volts up here. This 2K2 down here is to give us room to tell whether we are pressing it or not. And the 3K3 up here is to keep it from going too close to the power rail, or since that's not really a problem anymore, it's to make sure that we get about 4 volts for the 4 octaves. The soft pot itself is nominally 20 kilo ohms. Mine is, I think, about 22. So this works out to be about 4 volts across the soft pot and 1 volt distributed between the top and the bottom. So if we press it in more than one place, we're actually shorting those 2 positions on the resistive strip together. And so the total resistance of the voltage divider is decreased. And we can demonstrate this by putting a 3rd finger in the middle, and you can see it doesn't change anything. So when I press the 2nd finger on here, what I'm really doing is decreasing the total resistance of the voltage divider. I'm decreasing my denominator, while my numerator is staying the same because that's based only on the leftmost point. So what this means practically is that when I'm near the center of the range, I can almost treat it like it's the average of the 2 points. But when I'm far to the left or to the right, it's not so much like that, and it's pretty hard to make it musical. So initially I didn't have any markings on here, and it was pretty difficult to play anything in tune. It wasn't too bad to find a note that was a half step or a whole step away from another note, but anything like a 3rd or a 4th or an octave, there was just no way to get it in tune. So I created these markings, and I'll show you how I laid it out. I just used a speed square, and I demonstrate it, but it requires 2 hands and I don't have a camera mount yet. But I would just press the mechanical pencil against the strip and use my tuner to figure out when I was in tune. And when I was in tune, I just go down and put a little mark there. And this makes it a lot easier to find the notes I'm looking for. The thing that I like most about it is how nice it is to do a vibrato. So I can use my fingernail, and it's very easy to slide from side to side. But if I use the pad of my finger, I get some resistance, and I can wobble it back and forth just like a violin. Not that I play violin. So here we have the circuit board. I just used a proto board, cut off the end because I didn't need all of it. And I used just a couple thonk jacks, and then one of these screw terminals to connect the panel mount 1/4-inch jack. Got a trimmer to set the gate cutoff voltage. I'm just using a 4-pin connector for power. I'm only using +5 and 12. The panel I made from Purple Heart. It's just one of those blanks that I cut up, and I've been using them here and there. And yeah, just drilled a couple holes, used an existing module for the template for the mounting holes, and sanded it to 320, although if you look at it just right in the light, you can see I didn't do a very good job. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.